Oh, welcome to this episode of the YAHOWAH vlog. We're returning our attention to the series called Returning to the Garden. We are now at the point that YAHOWAH, after having chastised Hasatan, Satan, the serpent, he's turning his attention to the devil's little helpers because life would be more challenging for them. And it would be quite different for them. She would do as they were, well, as she was originally designed, which would mean that she would be supporting the man, no matter how challenging and undesirable that would be. And the garden's deadbeats were being served a giant slice of reality. What I don't think anyone has realized prior to our series on returning to the garden is that it's YAHOWAH who caused the fall of man. And he did so because he grew bored with Adam. Adam was conceived to work, and yet he didn't. He showed no initiative whatsoever. He was supposed to listen and respond appropriately, but he didn't. He was specifically designed to be observant because YAHOWAH wanted him to earn the right such that he could be trusted to be taken out of the garden and explore the universe with God. And yet he didn't seem to have any interest in that as well. And so it became exceedingly boring for God. He found man to be uninteresting, uninvolved, and unreliable. And therefore, God specifically caused the fall of man. And as we have gone through this story, we have come to realize many things, such as the fact that the two trees in the garden are the stars of the show. It's the tree of lives and the tree of knowledge. Most of the attention in this particular episode was on the tree of knowledge. And these two trees represent the same two individuals that were highlighted earlier in the Torah in the first chapter. This is now the second and third. And they were presented as the greater and lesser luminaries. Now they are the tree of lives and the tree of knowledge. We also determined that the Choter, which is one of the most interesting prophecies, probably the single most interesting prophecy pursuant to our time, taking the entire 14th proverb and the entire 11th chapter of Yeshayah to explain his purpose and his unique position, that the Choter is in fact the tree of knowledge, that there is nothing that differentiates them at all. So there are a lot of interesting insights. We were able to deduce the fact that YAHOWAH was created to be supportive of man, helping the man, and yet she turned out to be a hindrance to him. So it is a very interesting story, and the very fact that God now has escorted them out of the garden, he's having his last conversation with them, tells us that God was going to give us as humans, humans with a nasama, with a conscience, 6,000 years to get our act together. And over the course of 6,000 years, God expected that there would be someone who would come to appreciate what he was saying, who would listen to him, who would respond accordingly, who could be counted upon to do what needed to be done, who, when he makes a mistake or falls, would get back up and demonstrate that he could be trusted, and that there would be someone extraordinarily observant. That's why he's called the Nakar, the observant foreigner, and that this individual would call many more back to YAHOWAH, and that collectively we would end up in a situation where we're invited back into the garden. We have 1,000 years now, at least with a select few, to get our act together and demonstrate to YAHOWAH that we are, in fact, deserving of being able to explore the universe with him. And in this regard, Gan Eden and Sukkah, the seventh of YAHOWAH's Moed Mikre, are coterminous. Sukkah is about bringing us back to the garden. And in year 6,000 YAHOWAH, which is 2033, just 8 years from now, we're having this opportunity again for this mortal remnant of Israel to be allowed back into the garden, to demonstrate that we can do better than Adam did 6,000 years ago, and thereby earn YAHOWAH's trust. So as we consider the following assessment, it is instructive to know that it was directed towards this man and this woman, and So while it is natural to want to extrapolate beyond them, we can be certain that Yahweh was specifically addressing what had gone wrong in the garden, and we can learn from it. So he said to the woman, I will substantially and demonstrably increase. I will in magnitude, quantity, and time multiply the intensity of your labor, your expenditure of energy, and your great work, which will be challenging, and also in association with your childbearing, with your pregnancy in the period of gestation, giving birth, addressing the intensification of pains and pleasures of sex and of rearing children. With considerable physical effort and hard work, you will bear sons. And toward your man, your overwhelming emotions and feelings, along with your irresistible desire to dominate, mixed in with your strong sexual urges and abundant longings, they're going to make him responsible for educating you, for influencing you through dialogue and by painting word pictures which explain the situation, thereby governing with you by supervising you. Wahu mashal ba'ata. He himself will share narrative, symbolic meanings with you, such that he will be more in charge than you, as he uses vivid examples and pithy quotes to rule with you. Reshith, Genesis, the first book of the Torah. Now we're in the third chapter, 3:16. So when we consider God's pronouncement within the context that we have just witnessed, we find affirmations of prior conclusions. Adam and Chawah were far too passive. There is no indication that they made any contribution to the environment of the garden. And so now that they were out of the garden, they would have to struggle to survive. It's only fair. They would go from lounging around all day to an ordeal that would be enormously challenging for them. It's been a common mistake over the ages to narrow the implications of Ishobon Ata, your physical labor, with Heron Ata, your pregnancy and bearing children. With the Wah between them, one is in addition to the other. That is to say that all forms of work will be physically taxing, including bearing and raising children. Yahweh not only reinforced the realization that conceiving and rearing children would be one of life's greatest challenges, he was overwhelmingly telling Chawah that since she had foregone her role, which was to work with and support man, that, she would now have to do that very thing for them to survive outside the garden. And of course, Chawah did have 3 sons, and she flunked motherhood. On a broader note, it would require an enormous expenditure of energy to regenerate the tree of knowledge and to distribute its fruit, the result of which would be to bring children into the covenant family. None of it would be easy, as well I can surely attest. Now, in the garden, there was no indication that Adam showed any initiative. He didn't appear to teach or guide Chawah. Likewise, there is no mention of anything that the woman did that might be seen as beneficial for the man, and that's why she was conceived. Not wanting their ineptitude to continue, God naturally redirected the woman's attention and reaffirmed the man's role in their relationship. They had been deadbeats, but they would not be deadbeats going forward, or they wouldn't survive. Now, in so doing, we find the first indication of a fairly obvious dichotomy. Women generally are more emotional than men, and men are prone to organize their thoughts rationally. Chawah would be driven by shashuka, emotional feelings and strong desires. This would then require man to do a better job of establishing the paradigm under which they would govern their lives. For humankind to prevail, Man would have to lead, and he would have to educate. Therefore, through this narrative, Yahweh was telling us what went wrong in the garden and how to fix it. This wasn't a punishment. It was instead guidance. We were instructed to build our families through hard work and sound teaching. And we are more complete when reason and emotion coalesce. Yahweh explained the reasons behind and the resulting consequence of the fall of man. So now, separated from God, this advice is for our benefit. Then to the man, he said, because you have listened to the voice of your woman, and you have continuously consumed from the tree, which for the benefit of the relationship and to show the proper way to get the most out of life, I directed you, saying, you should not make a habit of devouring or destroying from him or it this Adamah, the earth, and the bloody red man, have now been hindered in an annoying manner based upon the actions of others for a while, which has actually inflicted something that is harmful. And in this way, this has occurred because of you. So with hard work, strenuous labor, and challenging physical effort, you will continually consume from it all of the days of your lives. Bereshith, in the beginning, Genesis 3:17. So there's a number of lessons here. Lesson 1 is, well, if you want to have a productive life and you want to spend any time around God, listen to Yahweh. Lesson 2, if you want a positive outcome as opposed to the negative one that these two endured, follow Yahweh's advice. Lesson 3 should be obvious, and yet it is the bane of religion. Do not value human words over God's words. Lesson 4, don't make a habit of annoying God, which these two absolutely did, and regularly. Lesson 5, Yahweh's promises are reliable. If he tells you this is cause and consequence, you can bank on it. Lesson 6, engage. Make a contribution if you want to impress God, if you want to earn his trust. Lesson 7, if you want to understand Yahweh, be especially observant and contemplative. So in this case, the fall of man became inevitable because Adam did not listen and he showed no initiative. The man paid no attention to anything God said, and he contributed nothing, essentially destroying the relationship. Humankind has consistently valued its own rhetoric over Yahweh's instructions. Religion is the consequence. Moreover, religion has backfired on women in particular because it is used by men to control them. The difference between teaching and tyranny is not only enormous, the value of one and the cost of the other is the lesson that humanity has long failed to grasp. Yahweh's issue with mankind is habitual behavior rather than a chance mistake, and that has become evident throughout this instruction. The teaching regarding the tree was consistently conveyed in the imperfect conjugation, which is to say, don't continually devour it. But both Chava and Adam admitted that their consumption was ongoing. In fact, we found Adam hanging out in the tree when Yahweh questioned him. The reason that this is important is that we are no longer guilty of poor judgment once we learn from our mistakes and choose a better course of action. I was once religious. I was once political. I am neither. I'm not guilty of either anymore. Now, this is why Yahweh asks us to walk away from the confounding nature of Babel, country and religion, the intermixing of politics and religion, rather than insist that we never venture in that direction in the first place. It's so much better when God just says, stop doing that thing. Now, this known. It is one thing to have been misled and then to have come upon the truth, giving up the religious lie for the joys of a relationship. And that's important. We are being encouraged to forego having been misled, to cling to the truth once we know it, and to give up the deceptions that have led us astray. But of course, it's another to have been shown what Yahweh expects of us, to have embraced it, and then to turn against what you had learned, to somehow satiate a personal desire. And that's what happened in the garden. There is no revolving door to God's home. You can enter the covenant on Yahweh's terms, and you can leave it on yours. But if you do, there is no coming back. You will have proven that you cannot be trusted. We're reminded that this whole story played out around the tree of knowledge. Its fruit was for another time and for other individuals. But even then, to covet it and then reject it is a crime with a serious consequence and cost. By prematurely releasing evil on a world equipped to, or ill-equipped, I should say, to suppress it with sound instruction, YAHOWAH, the earth, was cursed for a long time as the growth of man was stymied. We became particularly annoying to God. He was frustrated that he had even conceived us, regretting it. The most debilitating of the plagues would be man's propensity to conceive gods in man's image. And of course, through no fault of his own, it would make the job of the YAHOWAH, this bloody red man of the earth, all the more difficult, even at times exasperating and infuriating. So many lies to impugn. The surest way to prove one's worth with God is to engage, offering something of value. As was the case with the ark, Yahweh has provided a full set of instructions. So now the burden really is on us. We can either act, our God will pass us by and he will find someone who will listen and engage. Lazy and listless dependents are just lousy partners. Therefore, for one's life to become two lives, we must contribute during the first of them. Such are the lessons of the garden. Such has been the case with the reestablishment and growth of the tree of knowledge. It is why the story has been told this way, and I hope you're wiser for it. It is seldom discussed, mostly as a result of misleading translations, but Adam and Chawah were assessed and treated quite similarly. Ishibon was applied to both. Life would be challenging by design and necessity for man and woman. This is God's intent, since we were told at the outset that Adam was placed in the garden to pay attention to it and to work in it. Contributory labor and productive industry is not a punishment, because work has its rewards. It's highly valued by God. Life's greatest achievements are produced when we collaborate with Yahweh. David, who is the exemplar for us all, was often called Yahweh's Ebed, his co-worker. Well, in the garden, Adam was clearly coddled. That would not be the case once dismissed from it. And yet amidst the briars, a choder would emerge from YAHOWAH and eventually restore the relationship. Well, at least for some. This, like so much of the Torah, is written such that what begins harshly can lead in one or two directions: to degeneration and death, or restoration and life. The choice is yours. The text of Bereshith, Genesis 3, reads, "Disgusting thorn bushes that do not bear fruit, coats, detestable and loathsome, unproductive vegetation and abhorrent, irritating plants, twisted and splinter-like, as an awakening during the summer, and thistles used to goad and control, prickly plants, which are of no value and are used to restrict access, which choke out the productive plants. It will produce for you. So you will consume these plants of the open environs. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat bread, and you will devour war, akal lakem, until the restoring witness returns to transform you. Doing so by way of the Adamah, Ha-Adamah, the bloody red man of the earth, or unto the ground. From it and by it, you were obtained and will be received at a moment in time. Lakash, you were grasped and will be collected. You were brought forth and will be received at the proper period. Now, this is because you are a collection of particles comprising matter, even grayish dust and ash. And among dust or by ash, you will return, either be brought back or restored forevermore. Shub, you will be turned back again or changed and transformed with ongoing implications throughout time. Profoundly stated in Bereshith, in the beginning, the third chapter of the Torah, Genesis 3:19. Now, in the garden, they had been given everything they needed for a joyous and fulfilling, even meaningful and productive life, but they simply offered nothing back in return. That made them parasites, not partners. And that situation was not conducive to a meaningful relationship or sustained growth. Therefore, now that we are out on our own, there would be more thorns than fruit. The vegetation would be seeking to protect itself from being eaten, such that we, in looking for food, would have to work and adapt our environment to our needs. Man would have to learn to work, to be useful, and to become valuable, or he would die sooner rather than later. The contrast remains palpable. Rather than labor harmoniously in Gan Eden with Yahweh, making it better, thereby protecting and perfecting it, as God had intended, they contributed nothing. Instead of a combined effort to make us all better, the first time they were shown lifting a finger was to do precisely what they had been asked to reject. As a result, from now on, their focus would be on the more immediate and mundane issues of survival. The earth was good, the most conducive planet to life in the universe. But nonetheless, bad outcomes lurked behind every prickly bush. With the sparse knowledge they possessed, they would either make good better, or they would make bad worse. This is what they had chosen for themselves, and it was only fair. Having disregarded Yahweh's guidance, there would be a less appealing menu, and effort would be required to prepare it for consumption. it would be rough out there, even in an environment designed and finely tuned for life. Out in the wild, even lazy lions die. And if the two sides of Lechem, bread and war, were relevant, boy, is it ever applicable now. The divergent definitions of Lechem would come to be the story of man, bread and war, the hallmark of civilization, bread or war. It would remain this way, with our history demonstrating that bread would bring humans together and war would tear mankind apart. In the end, of course, we know that the prophets said that war would become global, even as many starve. And if not for the arrival of the this restoring witness, the human experience would turn out to be for naught. Without the transformation of the this eternal testimony provides, humans would forever remain estranged from God, ill-equipped to ever be trusted off this planet. Now, mixing his metaphors, as is Yahweh's custom, YAHOWAH, that gave rise to Adam and the Gan and its tree, as the the restoring witness, is going to serve to determine whether man returns to the garden or to the dust of the earth. Is man nothing more than a collection of earthen particles, physically as a body? Or is he to be restored as a soul into fellowship with God? Who among us will be purged by the ash of YAHOWAH, Parah, rather than remaining dirty, retaining their filth? Will you be among Adam, allowed to return to Gan Eden, restored forevermore by the witness, Diath, tree of knowledge, Choder, stem, Adamah Parah, bloody red man of the earth, who is a productive bull, and Bashar herald, who is Obed-Edom and Yada? What's your choice? So let's turn back the clock to the beginning of God's story, where we were introduced to Adam and YAHOWAH in Bereshith 2:5, pursuant to the value of abad work. There we read, and then Adam did not exist to work, abad, the earth. Bereshith 2:5. Even at that time, I shared that we would come back to where we began, to the value of making a contribution. Water rose, we were told, from the depths in the presence of YAHOWAH in this next statement, foretelling how the final determination offered in Bereshith 3:19 would be fulfilled 6,000 years thereafter. It reads, a subterranean supply of fresh water rose up out of the land. By this he watered or supplied water to the whole face, presence, and appearance of YAHOWAH, this bloody red man of the earth. This was Bereshith 2:6. And as I reminded our listeners then, Obed is from Abad, and Edom is Adam, with the addition of a Wah before the Mem, which is the means to puncture the Adamah, so that the subterranean waters, the Mem, are released. Immediately thereafter, God reinforced the connection between Adam and YAHOWAH via afar. He said, then Yahweh Almighty formed for association and accompaniment the man out of the material substance, the dust and ash, the apar of the earth. He blew into his nostrils anasama, a conscience, the capacity to be rational, to exercise good judgment, of records, being discerning and discriminating for lives, for more than one life, restoring and sustaining lives. And the man came to exist as a soul with consciousness, which is the ability to observe and respond for life. Bereshith 2:7. Now, in a moment, I'll explain why the afar, the dirt and ash, is particularly relevant to the restoration of Adam, of man. But for now, appreciate the contribution, our nasama, conscience, the capacity for rational thinking and good judgment, of recognizing the difference between right and wrong, discernment and discrimination make in our lives and where it can lead. Without it, there would be only one che, which would end in death. It is only when our nasama conscience augments our nephesh consciousness, which is our ability to observe and respond during our che lifetime, that we are trusted by God to leave this planet on another life. And in this regard, Eden is our opportunity to witness the doorway to life. That's why there's the tree of lives in the midst of the garden. So moving from one statement to the next, Yahweh revealed that he is responsible for life and its growth, and that these things happen in conjunction with Ha-Adamah, this bloody red man of the earth that becomes the man from Edom, according to Yeshaya. And they are directly attributable to these two trees, Chaim and Dayath. You see, God said, Yahweh, who is God Almighty, he enabled life to sprout up and grow from Ha-Adamah. Every aspect of the tree there to provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan for the purpose of overcoming challenges, to advocate the proper response, is delightful, desirable, and pleasing, as he is fruitful in delivering a productive and treasured harvest. To visually portray that which is clear and comprehensible, conveying a supernatural revelation. And as a beneficial and good, productive and pleasing thing to consume for nourishment. Ha'etz, the tree of Ha-Chamim, of lives, was in the center of Ha-Gan, this sheltered garden, along with Ha'etz, the tree of Ha-Dayath, the knowledge of good and productive, valuable and beneficial, and bad, wrong and corrupt, inappropriate and indeed ignorant. Bereshith 2:9. Included within these introductions and associations, we found Ha-Adam, Ha-Adamah, and Obed-Edom, a Nesama, a Nephesh, and Chaim, even Afar and Abad. Then we learned of the Etz serving as a Moreh, providing Chaim lives and the other Dayath knowledge. They were all firmly rooted at the commencement of the Gan garden. The depiction of the Etz Dayath brought us forward in time to the Choder, where the depictions and the purpose overlap seamlessly. Now, shortly thereafter, once Yahweh realized that man would have to grow up and toughen up to be an interesting, productive, and reliable partner rather than a parasite. We were introduced to the fall of man and to the rise of the Bashar, the human herald. Do you recall? So Yahweh Almighty, he caused the fall of man for being comatose due to a lack of work and diligence. He, man, slept, inert and inactive, unmotivated and sedentary. And so he grafted one of his ribs, symbolic of that which was limp and lame, from his side. And he sutured up and isolated the place beneath and succeeding it, even replacing it over time with a Bashar human herald. Prophetic, isn't it? Bereshith, Genesis 2:21. Well, that is a major eye-opener if her mind is open. The message of that herald was even announced by Adam. If you recall, he said, "Then the man said, 'This is the way to conduct one's life, the pattern of behavior to be followed, and the motivation to push forward. Its essential nature, the very substance of existence, out of my essence, a Bashar, a human herald, as a living being able to communicate intelligently, conveying my desire to share positive thoughts as a herald for humanity.'" That was Bereshith 2:23. We were even offered a harbinger of the covenant with Abraham and Sarah, foreshadowing the initial condition of the bereth. You recall, "Accordingly, therefore, it is also right that a man shall leave his father and his mother and engage, becoming close with his woman, and they shall exist as a unified Bashar," human proclamation regarding heralding the pronouncements of life. That was 2:24. So having established the purpose of the Bashar, let's not forget that Yahweh also introduced Yada. Because surely by contrast and alternatively, God, he is fully cognizant and totally familiar with Yada. He is aware of and recognizes that instead, and as an alternative, during the day, you consume it from him. Taking this, then your eyes and perceptions, even your vision and perspective, will cause you to be perceived as observant and enlightened as you herald and appreciate, enabling you to perceive and see, judging for yourself and deciding what is right and wrong. Then you will actually become suitably similar and more comparable to God, continuing to know Yada by being discerning and discriminating, thereby understanding and acknowledging the comprehension of good, of that which is beneficial, productive, pleasing, and correct, and of bad, that which is wrong, disappointing, and detrimental, hurtful, and injurious, distressing, because it is deeply troubling. That was Bereshith 3:5. The adversary was actually telling the truth in this regard, fully aware that anyone would and everyone would misconstrue this message. And in response, Yahweh would offer his cold voice, conveyed by his Ruach spirit in the proper day, to encourage mankind to listen and learn. So the eyes, the perceptions and perspective of both of them were opened, and they recognized by contrast that they were naked and exposed. So they stitched together fig, foliage, branches, and leaves, acting to make for themselves a covering. then with ongoing implications over time, they actually heard that which pertains to the cold voice of Yahweh Almighty, as he independently and on his own initiative, unaffected by other influences, traveled about concerning Hagan, this enclosed and sheltered garden, concerning the Ruach, the spirit of the day. Therefore, the man, Adam, and his woman withdrew as he moved away by himself, no longer assisted, influenced, or helped by anyone, from the very presence of Yahweh, Almighty God, severed in the midst of Hagan, the sheltered garden's Etz tree, there to provide counsel and advice through diligence and effort on the entirety of the plan for the purpose of overcoming challenges and to advocate for the proper response. Bereshith, 3rd chapter, 8th statement. So with the players properly positioned, I have an additional connection which must be understood. To complete God's story, I want you to appreciate the value of the afar in man's restoration. By doing so, you'll come to understand why God concluded his garden narrative with, "This is because a collection of particles comprising matter, even grayish dust and ash, are you, making you dirty. And among dust or by ash, you will return, either brought back or restored forevermore." This is Bereshith 3:19. So if you want an explanation of what God was specifically talking about here and why this was prophetic of something that he would relate later in the Torah, we're taking forward now from Bereshith Genesis into Bamidbar Numbers, particularly the 5th chapter. And so I want to explain how we as humans now have been given the opportunity to determine whether or not we are returned to the dust from which we came, or transformed and allowed to approach God by way of the ash that he will provide. This is the ultimate choice for everyone. So for an explanation of this, we thumb forward to Numbers 5 and the restoration of what's perceived to be the adulterous woman. That is religious Israel today. This is how it reads. Yahweh spoke to Moshe to say, "Provide instruction and direction regarding the children of Israel, such that they voluntarily send out from the encampment everyone who is infectious, whether mentally disoriented or chronically bothered by anxiety, hopelessly confused, or plagued by a pandemic disease, or perhaps leprous. In addition to everyone with oozing sores, discharging copious amounts of pus, including those with venereal disease, as well as everyone whose soul is contaminated, polluted, or defiled with religious idolatry." That is Numbers 5:1 and 5:2. Both male and female, men and women, boys and girls, as memorable and restoring witnesses. You should constantly send them away to outside the encampment, putting them apart where the community is living, so that they do not contaminate or corrupt it, so they don't infect anyone else. Their community in which, for the benefit of the relationship and to show the correct path to get the most out of life, within which I am dwelling, within their midst. In other words, if you're been corrupted by any transmittable disease, the most debilitating of which is religion, you need to be separated from others. separated indeed. So in the preamble to the cleansing of the adulterous woman, YAHOWAH is, by using contagious pathogens as a metaphor, telling us how we should deal with those whose toxic political and religious ideas are contagious, going viral. Isolation is God's recommendation. And I concur. And therefore, the children of Israel did so, and they sent them out such that they were apart in a public place outside the encampment of the community, consistent with the beneficial manner YAHOWAH had spoken to Moshe. The family engaging and enduring with God did what was right. So, YAHOWAH designed us. He knows how to keep us safe. And in this regard, God realizes that misleading political and religious platitudes are as infectious and deadly as any disease. Therefore, these people who are desirous of living with God must either remove this constant and caustic element from their midst, or they must move away from them. That is our choice. I constantly see Israel bragging that, that it's the best place for Christians to survive, the best place for Muslims to have freedom and this sort of thing. And it's exactly the opposite of what God said. We need to be isolated from religion and politics. It should have been obvious to everyone long ago that when YAHOWAH speaks of adultery, he's addressing those who were disloyal to him and to his son, cheating on them with false gods and a false Messiah. He is unconcerned over the number of girlfriends or wives the men who advance his agenda may share, which is obvious when one considers the totality of God's story. This then reads, YAHOWAH spoke to Moshe to say, declare this to the children of Israel. Branded with a stigma as a sign of being possessed and controlled by another is a man or a woman who chooses to continually act upon or habitually engage in any part of that which is offensive and wrong, with ensuing guilt for having missed the way, particularly if they lead others astray. By acting in an adulterous and unfaithful manner, being defiant and treacherous in an attempt to be superior to YAHOWAH, the soul of this person will be deemed guilty and will suffer the consequence of having done this. Bamidbar 5:6. So here, YAHOWAH was speaking through Moshe for our benefit because the children of Israel made the single worst decision in human history. Just a few years back from this moment, in his presence, after he had freed them from being enslaved under conditions which had become tantamount to genocide, they actually told God to his face to shut up and go away. They said they never wanted to see him or hear from him again. This is why YAHOWAH spoke indirectly through his prophets for the next 1,000 years. It is why they were wandering around in the wilderness. The Israelite problem progressed to the point that they strayed so far from YAHOWAH that they actually forgot his name. And so he did not intervene on their behalf, and he allowed 10 of the 12 tribes to be hauled away into oblivion. And even then, even with the best of the 12, Yehudah, after a while, there were none with whom to communicate. And that is why God asked and then equipped Hanakar, the observant foreigner, as the man from Edom, to serve as his cold voice, to awaken Yisrael before they stepped so far away from Shabuah, Teruah, the conflagration of the Adam of Parah, that they missed Yom Kippurim and its homecoming entirely, forfeiting their opportunity to return to the garden on Sukkah. Being wrong and missing the way, especially leading others astray, has become the Israelite stigma, a brand they have seared upon themselves. From God's perspective, it is adulterous and offensive. It has become a sign of defiance and revolt because so many have claimed to speak for the God that they have silenced, talking over him in the Talmud, against him in the New Testament. The consequence is guilt. And it is this rotten residue that must be expunged, even after we have stopped adding to it. For those desirous of being included in the Shabuah Katsir, the Teruah Lakot, their souls will have to be purged by Dod, with him having taken their guilt with him into Sheol during Matzah. However, for the remnant left behind during the final gleaning and with no intervening chog matzah to remove the fungus prior to Yahweh's return, well, it's going to have to be tossed, all of it, on the mutilated carcass of the Adam of Parah, where it will be incinerated. It bears repeating, the primary use of adultery in the Torah has nothing to do with sexuality or marriage. The men and women portrayed in the Torah were not monogamous. And they were neither criticized for having more than one lover, nor were they encouraged to act differently by God. What Yahweh expressed here and in context provided throughout his Torah and Nabi makes it obvious that his concern is his people cheating on the covenant relationship by being religious. For the past 24 years, I have filled the pages of YadaYahowah with this message. We must come to appreciate what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad, and take the initiative to acknowledge where we ourselves have erred. Even then, we must cast that which is wrong aside, separating ourselves from all that separates us from God. It is then that we are subject to being restored. And it is only then that anyone can begin the path to return home. Now, recognizing that we have been led astray by religious affiliations and political parties, the first step in the right direction is disassociating from both. And in this case, Yahweh's instruction was presented in the Hitpael stem, which states that this admission and resolve must be of our own initiative. This means that the barrier to entry for most is that the filth they continue to carry with them, this religious rubbish, that they recognize that God's not going to allow it in his home. And we push it away from us. We isolate it from us. On their own initiative, this reads, unaffected by others, they should understand, acknowledge, and then cast aside, their guilt from having been wrong and therefore misleading that they had engaged in up to this point in time. Then he can return, transformed and restored, with the first and foremost making a reconciling guilt offering for him, adding something over and above the fifth to it. And so, for the benefit of the relationship, he will offer this as a gift at this particular point in time, on behalf of the one who was guilty and liable for the wrongdoing, Bamidbar, Numbers 5:7. Well, overall, it's a fairly simple and straightforward process. Come to know and acknowledge that religion and politics are misleading and that God wants us to disassociate from both. It's the first condition of the covenant, to walk away from Babel. Cast these villains aside. Recognize that Yahweh has a plan to resolve the guilt incurred by us prior to accepting the truth about him. We do it in this order. We walk away from the entanglements and the corruption of religion and politics, and then begin our path to God. Now, almost anyone can be restored and come to Yahweh by acting upon this message once restitution is made to resolve prior guilt. For most, they will capitalize upon what Dode has done for us on Matzah, when he removed our shame and he carried it with his soul into Sheol, where he deposited it such that it will never be seen again. However, 8 years from now, the final Passover, uneasted bread, and firstborn children, prior to the king's return, well, they will have come and gone. Those who were among the last to observe Chag Matzah and capitalize upon the Messiah's gift will be among the souls that are gleaned during the fifth Mizmor. Our Moed, I should say. That being Teruah, the Mikra of Teruah. Those who had not, who were left behind, will now need to have their guilt removed by Yada, who will be serving as the Adam of Parah. It is his sacrifice as the productive bull that's going to provide the final opportunity to come clean and to come home. Yes, it is the fifth Moed Mikra that makes this possible. Therefore, the preamble to the story of the adulterous woman. In it, Yahweh is revealing that there will be a time when those who were deliberately passed over and excluded from participating in the fifth Moed, due to their lingering guilt, and who have failed to avail themselves of Dode's sacrifice, well, they're going to need immediate restitution. And for this, Yahweh's final reconciler will offer to remove their guilt and to have it obliterated with what is left of his Bashar, mortal body. As foretold, the Adam of Parah's gift of reconciliation will be presented during and beyond the fifth Moed. He will offer his life to restore the remnant of Yisrael, all on the cusp of the Messiah's return on the sixth Moed, Kippurim. Consistent with the prophecy of the Adam of Parah, the bull's sacrifice will cleanse the remnant souls by accepting and then incinerating their religious and political malfeasance. The Israelites will be, of course, in this predicament with only days remaining, because heretofore they have discredited and denied their God, their kinsman redeemer. And so while he will be returning to his city, the city of Dode, the remnant will have to find transformation and restoration this other way on the fifth Moed. Therefore, the final Zeroah, after devoting himself to cultivating the Katsir and Lakat of Shabuah and Teruah, will offer restoration by honoring the promise foretold of the bull of the day of the herald. And as the hopeful stem suggests, he will be as compelling and forceful as words and deeds allow. There will be no better option, nor will there be a day after tomorrow for those who neglected this offer and look elsewhere. It's a time to be observant. So what follows reveals that even after the time of Israel's troubles, as it concludes on Teruah, the conclusion of a horrific war, the testimony of the two compelling witnesses, the completion of two magnificent harvests, and the spectacle of the Adamah Parah, where God ignites the flames and releases the torrent of subterranean waters. The Israelites will remain a bit hesitant. They will not be returning to Eliah to capitalize on this gift from God in any great hurry. Many will be, well, as they have always been, stubborn, recalcitrant. But at this late moment, Yahweh will not allow his Zeroah sacrifice to be annulled. So he will apply it as he deems fit. And as we read these words, which will be the last of this program, I want you to know that it is evident that the bull and the ram, who are the prince and the king, will work together in this regard to transform Israel. So, if there are a few to approach this individual to be redeemed, to be transformed and restored, the guilt offering, which provides restitution, will be for whom the removal of guilt for reconciliation will actually change and restore, such that they can approach Yahweh. Accordingly, the one acting in the role of priest, in addition to the ram of reconciliations, for the benefit of the relationship, will make amends through the removal and purging of guilt, with him and for him. Bamidbar, Numbers 5:8. I don't know what God could possibly do to make it more obvious that the story of the adulterous woman is about the stigma of religiosity still staining Israel. Their propensity to favor religion over the covenant relationship. And that the Adamah Parah is going to serve alongside of the ram. That reconciliations that is provided by the ram will be enabled by the purging effect of the Adamah Parah. And that one act will lead to another. And that over this remarkable 10-day period, Israel will be in a position to make amends through the removal and the purging of the people's guilt. This is the story of Teruah. This is why Koporim becomes possible. This is the path back to the Gan Eden on Sukkah. So thank you for spending this hour with us and for your interest in returning to the garden. Good day.